$12 million vanished from inventory, and the CEO's son was the one who took it. I watched him empty his desk into a cardboard box while security stood on either side of him. And I remember thinking, 6 years. 6 years of logging every single shipment, every discrepancy, every lie. And it all came down to a Tuesday morning in March. But to understand how we got here, I need to take you back to a warehouse in Ohio, a man named Gerald, and the moment he realized his entire career was about to become collateral damage for someone else's crime. Gerald Hutchins started at Meridian Distribution Solutions in 2012. 43 years old, former Army logistics specialist. The kind of guy who could look at a shipping manifest and tell you exactly which line item didn't add up before you finished your first cup of coffee. Meridian wasn't glamorous. It was a regional distribution hub for industrial equipment, the kind of place that moved hydraulic pumps and conveyor parts to factories across the Midwest. Not sexy. But Gerald loved it, the way some people love complicated puzzles. He started as a floor supervisor. Within 18 months, he was warehouse manager, overseeing 140 employees across 3 shifts and about $60 million worth of inventory moving through those docks every year. His boss was a woman named Catherine Reyes, operations director, sharp, fair, respected. She'd been at Meridian for 11 years, and she ran a tight ship. Gerald trusted her completely. "You're the best hire I've made in a decade," she told him once. "You actually give a damn about doing this right." And he did. Gerald implemented a tracking system that reduced shipping errors by 62% in his first year. He cross-trained his team so thoroughly that they could cover any position on the floor. He built relationships with the drivers, the dock workers, the inventory clerks. More than anything, Gerald documented everything. It was an army habit. Every shipment logged, every discrepancy noted, every conversation about inventory problems followed up with an email summary. CYA, he used to say, cover your assets. His wife Denise thought it was overkill. "Gerald, you work for a distribution company, not the Pentagon." He'd just shrug. "You never know when the paperwork's going to matter." Turns out, Gerald was right. He just didn't know yet how right he'd be. In 2014, Meridian got acquired by a larger company called Vanguard Logistics Group, publicly traded, headquarters in Chicago. The kind of corporate parent that cared more about quarterly earnings than whether the hydraulic pumps got to Detroit on time. At first, nothing changed. Catherine stayed, Gerald stayed. The warehouse kept running. Then, in January 2015, Vanguard sent down a new regional VP to oversee operations. His name was Preston Whitmore. Preston was 38, MBA from Northwestern, fast-tracked through Vanguard's leadership program. He had the kind of confidence that comes from never having been told no. Oh, and one other detail that matters. His father was Vanguard's CEO. Now, some people would tell you that's fine. Nepotism exists everywhere. Maybe Preston earned his spot. Maybe the family connection was just a coincidence. I'm curious where you land on that, because what happened next suggests otherwise. Preston's first move was restructuring. He called it optimization. What it actually meant was cutting staff at every facility in his region by 15% to hit margin targets. Gerald pushed back in the first meeting. "We're already running lean," he said. "We cut 15%, we're going to see delays, errors, safety incidents." Preston smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Gerald, I appreciate the concern, but I've run the models. The inefficiencies are there. We just need to find them." Catherine backed Gerald up. "He's right, Preston. This facility has the lowest error rate in the region. Cutting here doesn't make sense." Preston's smile didn't waver. "Catherine, I'm sure you believe that, but belief isn't data. I'll need you to implement the cuts by end of quarter." That was the first red flag. Not the cuts themselves, but the way Preston dismissed objections, like other people's expertise was an inconvenience. The second red flag came 2 months later. Gerald was doing his monthly inventory reconciliation when he found the first discrepancy: 16 pallets of industrial motors. The manifest said they shipped to a customer in Indianapolis. The customer's receiving log said they never arrived. But the internal system showed delivery confirmed. Gerald flagged it, sent an email to Catherine, CC'd the inventory manager. Normal procedure. Stuff goes missing in logistics sometimes. Trucks get rerouted, paperwork gets lost. You investigate, you find the problem, you fix it. Except Catherine never responded. That was unusual. Catherine responded to everything within 24 hours. Gerald waited 2 days, then walked up to her office. She was packing a box. "Catherine?" She looked up. Her eyes were red. "Gerald, close the door." He did. "What's going on?" She sat down heavily. "I've been terminated. Effective immediately." Gerald felt the floor shift under him. "What? Why?" "Performance issues," she laughed bitterly. 11 years, best metrics in the region, and suddenly I have performance issues. That's insane. You should fight this. Catherine shook her head. "They're giving me a year's severance and a glowing reference. If I sign an NDA and go quietly," she paused. "Gerald, I'm 54. I can't afford to fight, not in this job market." Gerald understood. He hated it, but he understood. "Who's replacing you?" Catherine looked at him for a long moment. "No one. Preston is absorbing my responsibilities directly. He'll be your new boss." Gerald walked out of that meeting with a knot in his stomach that wouldn't go away for 6 years. What he didn't know yet was that Catherine's firing wasn't about performance. It was about what she'd started to notice. The same thing Gerald had flagged. Inventory was disappearing, and someone didn't want questions asked. Over the next 3 months, Gerald documented 17 more discrepancies. Shipments that vanished between the dock and the customer. Inventory that existed on paper but not on the shelves. Returns that were logged but never appeared in the warehouse. Every time he flagged it through proper channels. Every time the response was the same: investigating. Then nothing. He started keeping his own records, separate from the company system, a spreadsheet on his personal laptop. Dates, quantities, manifest numbers, customer names, dollar values. The army habit. Document everything. "What are you doing?" Denise asked him one night. "Homework?" She looked over his shoulder. "That's a lot of numbers, Gerald." "Something's wrong at work. I'm trying to figure out what." Denise was quiet for a moment. "Is this something you should be doing? Bringing work home like this?" Gerald saved the file. "Probably not. But if I'm right about what I think is happening, I need to be able to prove it." "And if you're wrong?" He looked at her. "Then I'm paranoid, and I've wasted some evenings." He wasn't wrong. Here's what Gerald pieced together over the next year. Preston Whitmore wasn't just a mediocre executive coasting on his father's name. He was running a scheme. The mechanics were simple, almost elegant in their audacity. Meridian handled high-value industrial equipment, motors, pumps, specialized parts, stuff that cost thousands of dollars per unit. Preston would identify shipments to customers with lax receiving procedures. Companies that trusted their vendors, didn't count every pallet, didn't reconcile immediately. The shipments would leave Meridian's dock complete, but somewhere between departure and arrival, a portion would vanish. The internal system would show full delivery. The customer, if they noticed at all, would file a complaint weeks or months later. By then, the paper trail was cold. Where did the missing inventory go? Preston had a contact. A guy who ran a secondary market for industrial equipment overseas. You could move a lot of merchandise through export channels if you knew the right people and didn't ask questions. Gerald estimated, based on his spreadsheets, that Preston had siphoned approximately $2 million in inventory in his first 18 months at Meridian. $2 million. And nobody was asking questions, because Preston had eliminated the one person who would have asked them: Catherine. Gerald had a choice to make. He could go to HR, report his suspicions, trust the system, or he could recognise that the system at Meridian was Preston. His father was the CEO. His allies were everywhere. Going to HR would be like reporting a crime to the criminal's best friend. There was a third option. He could quit, walk away, find another job, let someone else deal with it. He thought about it, seriously thought about it. Then he remembered something Catherine said when she was cleaning out her office. 11 years, Gerald. I gave them 11 years, and they threw me away the second I became inconvenient. Gerald decided to stay, and to build a case so airtight that even the CEO's son couldn't escape it. But here's the thing about going up against someone like Preston Whitmore. You don't get to make mistakes. You don't get to rush. You don't get to let your emotions show. You have to become invisible, patient, meticulous, for 6 years. I want you to understand what Gerald did over those 6 years, because it's the part of this story that separates him from everyone else who's ever been screwed by corporate politics. He didn't just document, he systematized. Every morning, Gerald arrived 30 minutes early. He walked the floor, counted high-value items personally, noted serial numbers, took photographs with his phone that he backed up to 3 different cloud services. Every evening, he reconciled his counts against the official inventory system. Discrepancies went into his spreadsheet: date, time, item, quantity, manifest number, customer, dollar value. He created cross-references. Which employees were on shift when discrepancies occurred? Which dock doors were used? Which trucks were involved? He mapped patterns. Preston's disappearances clustered around certain times: end of quarter, when attention was on financial reporting; holiday weeks, when staffing was light; inventory audit periods, when the chaos of counting provided cover. Gerald tracked everything for 6 years, 2,190 days, $17 million in documented discrepancies, and Preston never suspected a thing. Because here's the brilliance of Gerald's approach. He didn't act like a man building a case. He acted like a company man. He hit his metrics. He exceeded them, actually. Lowest error rates in the region, highest employee retention, best safety record. When Preston wanted cuts, Gerald found efficiencies that didn't compromise operations. When Preston wanted reports, Gerald provided them promptly and thoroughly. He became indispensable. The steady hand that kept Meridian running smoothly, while Preston focused on what he thought was a perfect crime. Gerald's the best warehouse manager I've ever worked with, Preston told the leadership team at a regional meeting in 2018. Gerald smiled and thanked him, and went home that night to update his spreadsheet with 3 more discrepancies worth $47,000. Denise knew something was happening. You can't live with someone for 20 years and not notice when they're carrying a weight. Whatever you're doing, she told him in 2019, I hope you know what you're doing. I do. And you're being careful? As careful as I know how. She reached across the table and took his hand. Gerald, if this goes wrong, we lose everything. The house, the retirement, everything. He squeezed her hand. I know. That's why it can't go wrong. Now there's something I haven't told you about Preston yet. Something that matters. In 2020, his father announced his retirement. After 30 years as Vanguard's CEO, Richard Whitmore was stepping down. The succession plan had been in place for a decade. Preston would take over, father to son, the Whitmore legacy continuing. But first, there was due diligence. New SEC regulations required enhanced scrutiny of executive transitions. The board ordered a comprehensive audit of every facility where Preston had operational responsibility, including Meridian. Gerald watched the audit team arrive in October 2020, and he felt his pulse quicken for the first time in 6 years. This was it. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. Except it wasn't. Not yet. Because the audit was internal, conducted by Vanguard's own compliance department, staffed by people who had every incentive to find nothing wrong. They spent 2 weeks at Meridian. They reviewed the official records, they interviewed employees, they checked the boxes. They found nothing. Gerald stood at his office window and watched them drive away. "Clean bill of health," Preston announced at the staff meeting that afternoon. "The audit team was impressed with our operations. This is a testament to everyone's hard work." He looked right at Gerald. "Especially you, Gerald. You've built something special here." Gerald nodded. "Thank you, Preston." And somewhere inside him, something crystallized. The system wasn't going to catch Preston. The board wasn't going to catch Preston. The regulators, the auditors, the compliance officers, none of them were going to do their jobs. If Gerald wanted justice, he was going to have to force it. Now, what Gerald did next is the part that still gives me chills. And if this story is hitting different for you, the kind of slow burn, methodical justice that takes 6 years of patience, you should subscribe, because what I've got coming tomorrow makes this look like a warm-up. Anyway, Gerald pulls out his phone and does something he's never done before. He makes a call. "Dennis, it's Gerald. Gerald Hutchins. Yeah, I know it's been a while. Listen, I need to ask you something. You still know people at the SEC?" Dennis Morgan, Gerald's roommate from his army logistics days, now a securities attorney in New York. They haven't spoken in 4 years. Christmas cards, the occasional LinkedIn like, nothing substantial. But Gerald remembered something Dennis said at a reunion once. The SEC's got whistleblower programs now. Real money, real protection. If you ever know someone sitting on something big, they should call me. Gerald was sitting on something big. Dennis listened for 45 minutes without interrupting. When Gerald finished, there was a long silence. "Gerald, what you're describing, if even half of it is true, this is securities fraud. This is theft. This is falsification of records at a publicly traded company." "I know. And you've been documenting this for 6 years. Every shipment, every discrepancy, every pattern." Another silence. "Can you get me the files?" "Encrypted, triple backed up, ready to go." Dennis laughed, a disbelieving, almost delighted laugh. "Gerald, you beautiful paranoid bastard. You built a prosecution case before the prosecution even knew there was a crime." Army habits. "Get me everything, every spreadsheet, every photo, every email. I'm going to loop in some people. This is going to take time to do right, but if your documentation holds up, Preston Whitmore isn't going to be CEO of anything." Gerald felt a weight lift that he hadn't realised he'd been carrying. "How long?" "A year. Maybe more. The SEC doesn't move fast, but once they move hard. You need to stay invisible until then. Can you do that?" "I've been invisible for 6 years. 1 more won't kill me." The next 14 months were the hardest of Gerald's life. He had to keep working for Preston, keep smiling, keep documenting, keep pretending nothing had changed. Meanwhile, Dennis was building connections. The SEC, the FBI's white-collar crime division, federal prosecutors in the Southern District of Ohio. Gerald's documentation was reviewed, cross-referenced, verified against shipping records, customer complaints, financial disclosures. It held up. Every single line item. $17 million in stolen inventory, laundered through a shell company Preston had set up in Delaware, funneled to a buyer in Eastern Europe, and hidden through falsified records at a publicly traded company. The case was airtight. But the investigators wanted more. They wanted Preston to incriminate himself, which meant Gerald had one more job to do. In September 2021, Dennis called with instructions. They want you to arrange a meeting. Get Preston talking about the inventory discrepancies. They'll provide you with a recording device. You don't need his confession, just his response when you raise concerns, how he handles it. Gerald's mouth went dry. You're asking me to wear a wire. I'm asking you to close the loop on 6 years of work. Gerald, you've done everything right. This is the last step. Gerald thought about Denise, about their house, about the 23 years until retirement that he'd been trying to protect. What if he catches me? Then you're a whistleblower with federal protection, and anything that happens to you becomes obstruction of justice. He'd be an idiot to touch you. He's not an idiot, Dennis. He's just arrogant. Which is why he's going to underestimate you, just like he has for 6 years. Gerald was quiet for a long moment. When? October 14th, 2021. Gerald requested a meeting with Preston to discuss concerning inventory trends. He kept his voice calm, professional, the same tone he'd used for 6 years. Preston agreed. Tuesday morning, 10 o'clock, his office. Gerald arrived at 9:45. The device was in his shirt pocket. A pen. Just a pen, except it recorded audio and video to a secure server in real time. He knocked on Preston's door. Gerald, come in, close the door. Preston was relaxed. Expensive suit, expensive watch, expensive confidence. What's this about inventory trends? I haven't seen anything concerning in the reports. Gerald sat down, crossed his legs, kept his voice steady. That's actually what I wanted to talk about. The reports and the reality don't quite match. Preston's smile flickered, just for a moment. What do you mean? I've been noticing discrepancies. Shipments that show as delivered but customers say never arrived. Returns logged that don't appear in physical inventory. It's been happening for a while. I wanted to bring it to your attention before someone else notices. Preston leaned back in his chair. Gerald, I appreciate your diligence, I really do. But those kinds of discrepancies happen in every distribution operation. It's the nature of the business. $17 million worth? The room went very quiet. Preston's face changed. Not a lot. Most people wouldn't have noticed. But Gerald had been watching this man for 6 years. He saw the mask slip. Where did you get that number? I've been keeping track. As part of my regular responsibilities, patterns emerge over time. Preston stood, walked to the window. When he spoke again, his voice was different, harder. Gerald, I'm going to give you some advice, as a friend. I'm listening. Some patterns are best left undiscovered. Some numbers are best left uncounted. Do you understand what I'm telling you? I'm not sure I do. Preston turned around. His eyes were flat. This company takes care of people who take care of the company. You've been very good at taking care of the company, Gerald. Don't complicate that now. Gerald felt his heart hammering, but his voice stayed even. What about the people who take inventory that belongs to the company? Who takes care of them? The silence stretched. Preston's jaw tightened. I think this meeting is over. And Gerald, I'd suggest you forget this conversation happened, for your own sake. Gerald stood. I understand. He walked to the door, stopped, turned back. Oh, Preston, I almost forgot. I've got my annual physical tomorrow. Doctor says I need to update my emergency contacts. Who should I list for Vanguard HR? Preston stared at him. I'll have Janet send you the form. Thanks. I'll be waiting. He made it to the parking lot before his hands started shaking. He made it home before he let himself breathe. He made it to his laptop before he forwarded the recording to Dennis. And then he waited. November 12th, 2021. Gerald was at his desk when the FBI arrived. 12 agents, blue jackets, boxes. They moved through the warehouse like a wave, collecting computers, files, records. They interviewed employees. They sealed Preston's office. Preston wasn't there. He'd called in sick that morning. By afternoon, Gerald learned why. The indictment was comprehensive. Securities fraud, wire fraud, theft of company assets, falsification of business records, tax evasion. $17 million in stolen inventory, just as Gerald had documented. But here's the part that made Gerald sit down in his chair and stare at the wall. Preston wasn't the only one indicted. 4 other employees at Vanguard facilities across the region, a shipping manager in Indiana, an inventory supervisor in Michigan, 2 drivers who'd been moving the stolen goods, and Richard Whitmore, Preston's father, the CEO. Turns out, the scheme was bigger than Gerald knew. Preston had been running variations at every facility he touched. His father had been looking the other way, falsifying quarterly reports to hide the discrepancies, collecting bonuses on inflated performance numbers. The total theft across all facilities, across all years, $47 million. Gerald had documented the Ohio piece, but his documentation was the key that unlocked everything else. Federal investigators used his patterns to identify similar discrepancies at other facilities. His methodology became the template for the entire investigation. The trial took 18 months. Gerald testified for 3 days. He explained his documentation system. He walked the jury through 6 years of spreadsheets, photographs, cross-references, pattern analysis. The defense tried to paint him as a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind. It didn't stick, because Gerald had never complained, never threatened, never made a scene. For 6 years, he'd been the perfect employee while building the perfect case. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Preston Whitmore was sentenced to 14 years in federal prison. Richard Whitmore got 9 years. He died in custody in 2024 of a heart attack. He was 73. The other conspirators received sentences ranging from 3 to 8 years. Vanguard Logistics Group paid $23 million in SEC fines, $15 million in restitution to defrauded customers, and $12 million in shareholder settlements. The stock dropped 60%. 3,000 employees lost their jobs when the company restructured. And here's where I have to be honest with you. Those 3,000 employees? They didn't do anything wrong. They were warehouse workers, drivers, clerks, people just like Gerald, who showed up every day and did their jobs. They got caught in the blast radius. Gerald thinks about that, more than he wants to admit. Some people would say he should have gone to HR in 2015, handled it internally. Maybe the outcome would have been different. Others would say the Whitmores were always going to destroy that company eventually, and Gerald just determined when the bill came due. I'm not sure where I land on it, but I know Gerald made peace with his choice a long time ago. What happened to Gerald? He was awarded $2.4 million under the SEC's whistleblower program. 15% of the sanctions collected as a result of his information. After taxes, he netted just over $1.7 million. He retired at 52. He and Denise paid off the house, set up college funds for their grandkids, took a trip to Italy they've been planning for 20 years. Gerald volunteers now at a workforce development centre, helping people transition out of the military into civilian logistics careers. He teaches them the same thing he taught himself: document everything, because you never know when the paperwork's going to matter. 6 years, 2,190 days, $17 million documented, 47 million recovered. All because a warehouse manager in Ohio decided that if the system wouldn't catch a thief, he'd build a case so airtight that the system couldn't ignore it. Gerald Hutchins wasn't special, not in the way movies make people special. He wasn't connected or wealthy or brilliant. He was patient, he was methodical, he was stubborn, and he was right. The stories that land in my inbox keep getting wilder. Every week, someone sends me something that makes me sit back and wonder how people get away with the things they try. Subscribe if you want to hear what shows up next. Some of these I genuinely can't believe happened. And hey, if you've ever had a boss like Preston, someone who thought their name made them untouchable, I want to hear about it. Did you stay and fight? Or did you walk away? Neither answer is wrong, but I'm curious what you chose. Because in my experience, everyone's got a moment where they had to decide. Gerald made his choice in 2015. It took 6 years to pay off, but God, did it pay off.